And if anyone wants to connect to the Wi-Fi name is Lemigo, small letters, and the password is Lemigo, small letters as well. Remember, you can share on social media what is happening here today. Okay.
Farmers, Canada's International Development Research Centre.
As we give the technical team just a few more minutes to finalize on that, I'd like to mention that right after this video, we'll be transitioning into our first panel discussion, and the panel will be looking at innovations that foster resilient, inclusive, gender-responsive agriculture values. So let's all get ready for that. And remember, the hashtag to use on social media is IDRC @AGRF.
Climate change is among humanity's greatest challenges, for which the food system is both a victim and a contributor in Africa, just like elsewhere on planet Earth. To curb some of the challenges faced, Canada's International Development Research Centre, IDRC, with its core funding partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, BMGF, Global Affairs Canada, the Rockefeller based in African IDRC, with its core funding partners, Bill and Melinda. Climate change is among humanity's greatest challenges, for which the food system is both a victim and a contributor in Africa, just like elsewhere on planet Earth. To curb some of the challenges faced in African food systems, especially by women farmers, Canada's International Development Research Centre, IDRC, with its core funding partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, BMGF, Global Affairs Canada, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, is supporting innovations that foster resilience in the food systems, including agricultural value chains that are both inclusive and gender responsive and supported by appropriate policy frameworks for crop and livestock production. It is a fact that African women make up a majority of smallholder livestock farmers and bear the primary responsibility of caring for diseased animals, but with dwindling incomes. In Ghana, research identified multiple barriers that impede women from fully benefiting from better livestock production, such as unsuitable vaccines, lack of extension services, as well as women's limited decision-making in their households and communities. They needed help. To counter the barriers, IDRC, with co-funding from BMGF and Global Affairs Canada, have offered training in livestock production to women smallholder farmers across Africa, resulting in improved livestock productivity, better livelihoods, and increased opportunities for women through the Livestock Vaccine Innovation Platform. The platform has transformed the vaccine delivery system and identified approaches that benefit women and increase women's access to formal paid work, such as community-based animal health workers, veterinarians, and livestock advisors. With each stride taken along the livestock value chain proving to have long-term benefits, even more so, each stride guaranteeing farmers that there is hope beyond their field crops is reassuring. One such stride is through a picture-based crop insurance (PBI) that relies on imagery or photos taken by farmers using smartphones to show crop damage caused by extreme weather conditions. Agronomists review the images of the crop, after which they suggest appropriate payouts to affected farmers. Policy payouts allow farmers to reinvest in their farms after crop losses by enabling them to access seeds and pay for necessary labor. PBI also helps farmers to access extension advisories from the PBI mobile app Seed Grow. There is a broad consensus that innovations are key in meeting the challenges that confront the African smallholder farmers for healthier foods and quality animal feed. Insects for livestock feed, INSFeed, is one such innovation answering the need for quality animal feed. How? Well, insects such as the black soldier fly that are rich in protein are widely considered alternative proteins for animal feeds. INSFeed aims at scaling up demand for insect-based animal feed by working with the private sector, youth, and small-scale farmers to scale up production and commercialize insect-based products. As a result, 3 policies have been developed in Kenya and 1 in Uganda on code of practice in dealing with edible insects and products containing edible insects. Individual farmers, multinational companies, and processing industry players interested in insects for livestock feed can now request and get accreditation to enable their products to be sold worldwide. Indeed, innovation like this one in food systems and agriculture is opening Africa to share something with the world. The food system is not limited to the supply side. Taking a food systems approach requires a look at the entire ecosystem of food from the farm to the consumer's table. Like in any developing world, African countries too are undergoing a nutrition transition, basically shifting from traditional diets to the consumption of more processed and healthy foods. Efforts to address these challenges in a holistic manner are on. The Food System Transformative Integrated Policy Initiative, FSTIP, is one such example of how IDRC, in collaboration with partners, is supporting governments to embark on the food system transformation journey. FSTIP has involved a consortium of food systems partners and contributed substantially to country dialogues and political commitments as made at the United Nations UN Food Systems Summit of 2021. FSTIP is catalyzing change for healthy and sustainable food systems. Innovation systems in food and agriculture explore the relationships between productivity and environmental sustainability. No wonder African Group of Negotiators Expert Support, also referred to simply as AGNES, created in 2015, has been spearheading discussions on behalf of the African continent on food productivity and environmental sustainability. They provide scientific expertise and evidence-based information to African climate negotiators and seek to facilitate the exchange of ideas between experts and negotiators in international settings such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, submitting several topics such as the development of early warning systems and contingency plans about extreme weather events, as well as risk and vulnerability assessments of agricultural systems to various climate change scenarios, including but not limited to the menace of pests and diseases responsible for dwindling fortunes in food production and food security affecting smallholder farmers. In Mozambique, smallholder farmers contribute 95% of agricultural production. The government, being aware of the threat brought about by climate change to food production, is working with development partners, and together they have invested heavily in energizing and expanding smallholder irrigation schemes, the aim being to reduce poverty. The farmer-led smallholder irrigation in Mozambique, FASIMO project, has introduced smallholder farmers to chameleon soil water sensors and wetting front detectors. The detectors measure soil water content and can be used to collect samples for nutrient and salinity tests, while the chameleon sensor measures soil moisture levels and displays a color code to the user depending on how dry the soil is. With this, the good news is that smallholder farmers are able to reduce by half the amount of water used on irrigation, cut back fuel and labor costs by almost 40%, increase their productivity, save time, send children to school, expand their irrigation land, and participate in community affairs. To realize greater impacts and move innovations even further, partnerships are becoming important, and as such, IDRC's efforts and impact are made stronger by building relations with like-minded partners such as Global Affairs Canada, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. These partnerships signal a greater impact for generations of farmers and communities to come.
A round of applause to the partners that make the great work come to life. Another round of applause. As highlighted in the video, it's clear that IDRC's work cuts across different regions here within the African continent, and it has innovation and inclusivity at the heart of what they do. Now, without much waiting, we're going to dive right into our first panel, which will be on innovations that foster resilient, inclusive, gender-responsive agricultural values. And I would like you all to help me welcome our moderator for this session. We're going to have Dr. Edida Lubega-Ampaire, the Senior Program Specialist at IDRC. She sits in the Office for East and Southern Africa in Nairobi.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Let me correct something a bit. That's work done by IDRC and partners, not IDRC alone. Thank you so much. So I have the speakers for today. I'm going to invite you to take your seats. And I mentioned something about you, Miss Lillian Wataka. This one is an expert in geographic information systems and Earth observation data. Please take your seat. There's your name somewhere, so find your name. Dr. Emilio Maiga is Associate Professor at the University of Edward Mondlane in Mozambique. And Dr. Helen Amguni is Assistant Professor in the Department of Infectious Diseases and Global Health at Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine, Tufts University, USA. And finally, Ms. Agnes Loliba Is the team leader for Care International in Ghana's Right to Food, Water, Nutrition Security, and Climate Change Program Portfolio. She works for Care International in Ghana. And Fiona made my work very easy. She already talked about the session that we're going into, so we don't want to waste any more time. And I will invite Lillian to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edida. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lillian Waithaka, and I work at ECA Africa, where our core focus is on smallholder farmers. We often say that farmers plant hoping for the best, but do not plan for the worst. At ECA Africa, we try to link these smallholder farmers to risk mitigation and climate adaptation solutions so that they can comfortably invest in their farms. Now, up to 80% of the farmers in Kenya are smallholder farmers, and yet they face significant challenges, especially in face of climate change-related risks, such as pests, diseases, excessive rainfall, and floods. Reports indicate that these farmers lose up to 90% of their expected yield due to these climate risks. This discourages them from investing in their farms and drives them into unsustainable practices, such as they keep children out of school, they sell off productive assets, and they also reduce on their diets. Now, climate crop insurance cushions farmers against crop-related losses and also financial losses, especially occasioned by climate change. Often, people have cited insurance as a tool that helps farmers escape poverty. And yet, the number of sustainable or successful insurance schemes that target smallholder farmers are limited, and for the following reasons. One, affordability. You find that traditional-based insurance schemes are expensive for our smallholder farmers. Two, low demand because of low trust in our insurance products. And three, lack of complementary risk resilience technologies or practices such as planting stress-tolerant seed varieties, adherence to advisories, and good agronomic practices. In our project, the Picture-Based Insurance Project, we offer these farmers an affordable, innovative, inclusive, climate-smart agriculture crop insurance product that is designed by using satellite images and cell phone imagery that is taken using a smartphone. In order to promote trust and also accelerate uptake of our insurance product, we work with a network of farmers that we call champion farmers. These are model farmers or key opinion shapers in the villages that they reside in. This, out of the champion farmers that we have in Kenya, 2/3 of these are women. We engage the champion farmers to take images of the crop throughout the crop stages of a season. So from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. And they do this using an app that is known as See It Grow. So you see it growing. At the end of the season, we have a panel of experts, insurance companies, agronomists that sit down and evaluate these images, and they're able to score based on the damage that is seen or visible on the images. And this forms the basis of making claims to our farmers. In order to join this cost-effective scheme, a farmer only needs to dial a USSD code. I know most of you are familiar with it. *800 *72#. And they're automatically onboarded onto insurance. They just choose the type of crop and the denomination of the crop that they want to cover. Let me tell you about Elizabeth Msembi, a mother of 3, 42 years old, living in Machakos County in Kenya. In the long range of 2021, Elizabeth managed to take out a climate-smart insurance cover by paying a premium of $2. Unfortunately for Machakos County, there was a drought or shortage of rainfall that so many farmers lose their crop. But fortunately for Elizabeth, she was able to get up to $15 in compensation. And do you know what she did with this? She bought 3 bags of seed, and she was able to plant in the next season. Another good example of a champion farmer is Zachary Mwenda, 64-year-old, father of 6, living in Tharaka-Nithi County. He was handpicked by his county to go and represent the county in matters digital platforms in agriculture in Nigeria, all thanks to our project. In light of gender dynamics, we find that women are more risk-averse, so you find that women are taking up our insurance cover compared to their male counterparts. But they're also limited by their perceptions that gender-based violence is acceptable. In order to mitigate this in our project, we are working with a local popular Kenyan television show, and I think the Kenyans in the room might know it, Shamba Shape Up, trying to disseminate gender-based messages at scale, trying to desensitize against gender-based violence, and also encourage farmers to take up insurance, especially innovative insurance. We do not only stop at insurance. We also link these farmers to stress-tolerant seed variety. Rather, companies that sell stress-tolerant variety of seeds. We also encourage farmers to adhere to good agronomic practices, also adhere to advisories, and also train them persistently on how to protect their crops against drought and related events. Ultimately, by helping to build resilience of our smallholder farmers, we do not only support individuals, but we try and foster economic growth and food security. I will give you this saying that was usually say with our farmers when you go to the field: a happy farmer equals a happy nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia. You can take your seat back. Thank you so much. I heard you right there. Simple technologies, affordable, low cost, complements with other things. Dr. Emilio, as you take that tool, please. Another round of applause for Lillian as she takes on the stage.
Good morning. I'm Emilio Magaya from Mozambique, as was stated. I come here to give you a brief about our project. As you know, Mozambique is a country that faces very hard climate issues. Related with that, we need to feed people since we notice the population growth along this time. Then the question is, how do we cope with this? For that, we managed to bring a group of institutions that we built and wrote a project that's called farm-led smallholder irrigation in Mozambique with a short name FAZIMO. What is the main objective of this project is to take the farmers where they are now and go up to the new stage where they can produce more with the less. Since you know that most of the farmers, even when they irrigate, they just look to the soil that is dry, like the first soil layer, and they say, okay, now I need to irrigate. But we know that water is a very scarce resource. Then we came with this very simple tool that we have seen in the video that calls chameleon. It's like a traffic lamp, very simple. Everyone can know, so you don't need to know the numbers. You just need to know the colors. If it's red, you know something is coming that's not good, meaning the soil is dry. If it's green, there is a chance it's like orange in the traffic lamp. You have started to brake or to speed up, depending on your behavior. Then the green, which is in our side, is blue, shows us that there is enough water in the soil and you don't need to irrigate. That is very simple. And as you can see in the picture in the screens, the lady is holding this chameleon. She's so happy and she's eager to explain how it works. And they gave their testimony that FAZIMO changed their lives because FAZIMO came and teach them how to irrigate, how to do fertilization based on the amount of soil water that is available there. then we can ask, what happened then? Using these instruments, we managed to reduce the irrigation events by half, meaning that it's like we in this room. We imagine producing the same amount of food, but with less resource, like water in this case. The second thing that they managed to get from this instrument is to reduce the cost of irrigation. Imagine they reduced the time of switching on and off the pumps, reducing the amount of petrol they're using. This money could be used for other things. And also the yield increase. We managed to show the farmers that it's possible to increase the yields just by changing a little of behavior, by just looking for these colors in the field. Then now the farmer is saying, please, Fazimo, you are so small. Can you grow up? Can you go all over the country? Because this is very important too. You have shown that it's possible to change our life. The issue is, what is the take-home message now? With the right and the simple tool, we can beat the hunger and be resilient in our food system. Saying that, I would like you to see our posters to get more information on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emilio. Doesn't sound like rocket science, does it? No, simple things that transform lives. Dr. Helen, when you take the stage. So this was about resilience. Next we'll look at the value chains, transforming value chains to make them gender responsive.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Amuguni, and I'm working on a project called Shivax. We are looking at empowering women in Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda to access livestock vaccines and to demand for them. We work together with Africa One Health University Network, University of Rwanda, University of Nairobi, as well as Makerere University. So 2.5 years ago, we were here in Rwanda, and we met Alice. Alice is a smallholder farmer, what we call a backyard poultry farmer. When we met Alice, she had just lost 17 of her chickens, all the chickens that she had, to Newcastle disease. Newcastle disease is a disease that comes, sweeps through the whole neighborhood, kills all the chickens, and then people just continue. They start keeping their chickens afresh again. This happens to Alice as well as to her other neighbors. When we went to Uganda, we met Rosa. Rosa is a widow and a mother of 5. She had a son who had been sent home for school fees, but she could not pay it because she had lost her goats, 12 of them, to PPR, another livestock disease that has a vaccine. 750 million people in the world keep livestock as a source of livelihood. Out of these, more than half are women. These women rely on this livestock for food, to take care of the health care of their families, to educate their children. Livestock diseases are devastating to them, but there are vaccines for these diseases. So what are the big challenges to these vaccines being able to be accessed by women? One of the biggest things that we all know is the lack of a cold chain. You know that vaccines require refrigeration, but we know in rural Africa, in many places, there are no fridges. There's no electricity, and where electricity is available, it's not reliable. It's very erratic. It can come for an hour, disappear for 2 hours, and so they're not able to store these vaccines whenever they want them. In fact, even in the big centers, the big cities, we've talked to agrovets who at night take their vaccines, put them in cool boxes with ice, and then store that for the night so that during the morning, they can put them back in the fridge because power does disappear at night. The second problem is a lack of animal health service providers. When we talked to the director of veterinary services in Machakos, Kenya, he told us that he has 1 animal health service provider for 30,000 households. To put this in perspective, it's supposed to be one animal health service provider for 3,000 households. That one person is facing an impossible task. They're not able to deal with this. And one of the third issues is that women lack information on vaccines, they lack information on animal health, they lack information on livestock management. Just like Alice and Rosa, who knew that there is a vaccine, they might not be able to access it, or they did not even have the information that the vaccine is available. Next. So what we are doing right now with SheVax, our project, is we are tackling these problems. We have established what we call a women-centered livestock vaccine private sector delivery system. How are we doing this? The first thing we are tackling is the issue of the cold chain. How are we doing that? We're going solar. We know that with solar-powered refrigerators, it's climate resilient, it's environmentally friendly, it's reliable, and everyone in the communities can be able to access this. We have been able to install 30 refrigerators across the different countries where we're working right now. The second thing that we are doing is we are training and equipping women animal health service providers. These women are local, they work in those areas, and we've equipped them with solar refrigerators, we've equipped them with vaccine. Right now, 24 women that we have trained are able to provide services to 140,000 households. So remember, I talked about one AHSP for every 30,000 households. We've managed to reduce this to one for every 6,000 households. And since this is a business model, our women animal health service providers are actually making money. We've taken them from not being able to make any money to now being able to generate an income from $50 here in Rwanda per month to about $250 in Uganda per month. You can say, what does $50 do? I can tell you that for a Rwandan family of 4, they need $25 to purchase healthcare insurance for the whole year. One of the other things that we're doing very aggressively is providing women with information on where they can access vaccines and how to deal, where they can get veterinary services, what kind of information they need for training. We are using simple tools. We are using vaccination calendars. We are using comic books. We are using animated videos that we put at strategic points like health centers where we know women go all the time. And so we know that women pay for services. Women will pay to protect their animals from disease. 400 million women, livestock keepers, that we have. Can you imagine if we were able to just provide animal health or vaccine services for just 1/10 of those? What kind of impact would we have? Just imagine that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hela, for your outstanding results. As Agnes goes, we will open up after Agnes has finished to take your questions to respond. So Agnes, please.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings from Ghana. I am Agnes Loriba. I work on the Women Rare Project, a vaccine project that focuses on women. Growing up in northern Ghana, a key fact I have learned is that no rural household makes it through the 7-month-long dry season without any livestock. The surest way to identify a family that would have a difficult lean season is to look out for houses that show no sign of having any animals. In Ghana, over 3 million families farmers and their families depend on livestock for food and income. This key livelihood source is, however, affected by animal diseases that can be prevented by vaccines. Key among these are the Newcastle disease in chicken and PPR in goats. A Newcastle disease outbreak can result in the death of 8 out of every 10 birds, and PPR can result in the death of 7 out of every 10 goats. Goats and chicken are important for women's livelihoods. However, they suffer the most mortality because they participate the least in vaccinating their animals. Out of every 10 farmers who vaccinate their animals, less than 20% are women. Vaccines are available for these diseases. The question is, why don't women vaccinate their animals? The answer to this is in part due to traditional and cultural barriers that limit the ability of these women to request to have their animals vaccinated. A lot of vet service providers, who are mostly men, do not deliberately target women with vaccines. And just like my colleague spoke about, we do also have challenges with refrigeration for vaccines. Our team of 3 unique institutions, composed of Care International in Ghana, the International Livestock Research Institute, and Cow Tribe Technology, has been working to better understand the best practices for reaching women with vaccines and how we can have women better participate as vaccinators. We are doing this through 4 key approaches. These have been, 1, working with communities and traditional leaders to better understand these cultural and traditional practices and to determine what can be done to influence change. We have also recruited 2 female vaccinators to participate in vaccinating animals and to understand the potential of reaching women through women vaccinators. These vaccinators are supported by over 100 women who are selected from the women groups we work with. They support in mobilizing other women and participate in delivering vaccines to members of their groups. We are also investing in providing refrigeration for vaccines. And we are rolling out a digital vaccine delivery application that enables both male and female farmers register to have their animals vaccinated. The cumulative effect of these interventions we are rolling out, I will tell you through the experience of one of the female vets we are working with. She's Sharifa. Sharifa joined the project immediately she completed veterinary training and was happy about the opportunity to serve on this project. However, she quickly learned about the cultural and traditional practices that would limit her ability to work effectively and also reach women with the vaccines that they need. She learned that farmers, especially men, didn't think she would be equally capable of delivering vaccines and that she may not be able to restrain animals for vaccination. She was also very surprised to learn that in some communities, people believe that when a woman is menstruating and visits the animal pen, the animals are likely to die, or the birds, the eggs that are there may not hatch. She also got to know that women are not requesting for vaccines because there's no motivation to do so. They don't engage in directly selling the animals that they keep. And so without controlling the income, why should they vaccinate? In 2 years, Sharifa is happy about the change she's seeing. She's seeing changes and shifts in these traditional and cultural practices as a result of the interventions of the project. She feels more accepted as a female vet in the community and happy to see men support their wives to have their animals vaccinated. We have 4,000 women who have registered on the vaccine app. Annually, we deliver more than 10,000 vaccine doses to these women. And these are vaccines that the women pay for. Through improving vaccine refrigeration, we have reduced vaccine wastage by 1/3. Sharifa is happy about the change she's seeing in the project communities. She, however, hopes that this becomes the story of every female livestock keeper, not only in Ghana, but across Africa. My question to you is, how do we make Sharifa's hope a reality? And our team comes to you with 3 key recommendations. 1, let's sensitize both male and female vets to deliberately target women with vaccines. We should also work on attracting women to vet training institutions. And our 3rd recommendation is that we improve the vaccine cold chain by partnering with the private sector. Thanks very much for your attention.
too. Thank you so much, Agnes. Give her another round of applause. So just as you prepare your question, I'm just noting like something that has gone wrong for generations, and these projects are just correcting it. And, you know, still again, not rocket science, is being able to bring up innovations that are adaptable, train a woman, equip them, give them the resources they need, and send them to bring more women. Can I take questions? I have a loud voice, by the way. You tell us the question goes. Please tell us who your question is addressed to. There's echo. Eh?
Experiences of Sharifa towards the end of your intervention. You noted that things have changed for the better due to the interventions that you have deployed. I wanted to find out from you if you could throw a little bit more light on some of those specific interventions that you believe contributed to the success that you have shared, as far as those cultural shifts that we talked about. Thank you.
We'll take, and then we'll give the opportunity to the panelists to answer. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Doreen. I work with World African Women in Agricultural Research and Development. My question is to Agnes. I really enjoyed listening to your story about Sharifa. And I'm wondering if there's anything you're doing as you help them increase their productivity. Are you also helping them address the issues of markets? Because as they increase their productivity, they have more produce. So what happens when they have surplus? Is there anything you're doing about connecting them to markets or increasing the access to markets and reliable markets? Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Another person? Yes, there's another.
Good morning. My name is Maureen Miruka, and I work with Agnes at CARE. Really glad to hear the progress that has been made on all the projects. My question really goes, I think, to all four of the panelists, because we really are emphasizing a digital approach with regards to the innovations and use of phones, asking if they are smartphones or they can also work with other phones, and also whether we are looking at the asset ownership within the household, whether women actually have access and controls, to the phones, because we know that the youth have sort of taken over from this. I was buying a phone for my aunt, and she said, please buy me a lower tech one because my sons will take it away from me. So how are we going to ensure that women can actually use these technologies to the end? But thank you, you're all doing amazing work.
Thank you, Maureen. Any other question? Yes, there's another one.
Bonjour à tous. Je vais m'exprimer en français. Ma question c'était, j'ai suivi les interventions et j'apprécie beaucoup. Moi, je commence par mon nom, je m'excuse. Moi c'est Richard Maïcha. Je travaille pour l'organisation People in Need et la mission RD Congo. J'ai suivi avec intérêt les interventions. Et je voulais juste demander si, avec tout ce qu'on a énuméré là-bas, est-ce qu'on accède aux agriculteurs l'accès au crédit dans ces différentes interventions? La deuxième question, c'était par rapport aux images. J'ai eu une présentation où on parlait des images les images par rapport aux cultures qui sont détruites. Et là, je voulais demander, est-ce que les images sont analysées immédiatement ou c'est avec une prédiction où on peut aller à dire par rapport à l'intensité, à la sévérité de la maladie? Merci.
Can we have someone repeat the two questions in English, please? I think the translation didn't work well and the people being asked may not to be able to answer those. So there was another hand right here. We could take that hand and then we come back to have those questions asked in English.
Hello, my name is Sophia. I work for AETF, which is a technology transfer organization. So my question goes to Lillian, and thank you all for very interesting presentations and exciting projects. So I wasn't sure, in terms of the back end, whether there was a de-risking arrangement, because we know it's hard to get insurance and expensive. So how have you sorted out the whole, the price to be affordable and any de-risking? Thank you.
Okay, I guess let's take those questions. Let's have.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. So maybe I'll answer the last question. So for us to make the insurance cover affordable, we are using satellite imagery. So basically we are leveraging on technology to help us in making our products affordable. So satellite imagery is actually free. It's free to access. Hello, 1, 2? Yes. Thank you so much for that question. So just to answer how we are making our insurance products more holder is that we are using satellite technology. We are leveraging basically on technology. Satellite imagery is actually, so we are able to access this satellite imagery for free. Then using our expertise in the company, we are able to design products using that satellite imagery. So let me give you an example of the products that we have. We have rainfall data from satellite. We have data from satellite. We have evapotranspiration data from satellite. And I know you'll agree with me that all these are those really important for our crop production, right? So using these parameters, we're able to design our insurance products, and this makes it more affordable compared to the traditional insurance schemes where you have to go to the field and assess the damage. So the cost of sending an assessor to the field is what makes it more expensive. So by having an indicator of loss sitting at the comfort of your desk makes our insurance products much more cheaper compared to the traditional one. Then I think there was another question about assets and control over assets. So one thing that we've done as an intervention in the project is that we've given the farmers We've capacitated them through the funding from IDRC and ACAR. We've capacitated them with smartphones, and you find that we have 2 out of 3 being female farmers. So we have more farmers now owning more phones. We're also in partnership with different phone companies such as Safaricom to make these devices much more affordable to our farmers, our smallholder farmers. And I also want to just say that where we are moving in terms of technology, I'm sure things are going to be much cheaper going forward. Phones are already accessible, especially in Kenya. The penetration rate is high, mostly because of mobile money services, M-Pesa, and I think most of you are aware of that M-Pesa service. So we are not really worried about technology and about ownership of phones. We think that the future is our playground, yeah, based on the technology advances. So, thank you.
Further question?
Okay, so thank you very much. I'll take the my brother from the University of Ghana, specifically about the interventions that have contributed to shifting these norms. I think there's an echo. Yeah. In terms of social norm change, we do work directly with the communities, ensuring that we work with both men and women and the community leaders. So community leaders, we look beyond traditional leaders, religious leaders and all that. And key to this approach is in working with the communities to really understand what the norms are, the rationale for these norms, and reflect with the communities on the effect of these norms on the woman and also generally on the livelihood of the family or the household. And then have these communities commit to specific actions that they would take. And I must say that we find this process very impactful, especially when you have the communities themselves do the analysis. So I'll give you an example of maybe some of these dialogues we have with communities. So in my experience in one of these dialogues, communities were talking about the reason why women are not allowed to openly declare ownership of their livestock. And we had women provide reasons for in support of or not. And there's a man who shared a critical question that really changed the mindset of a lot of the men in that forum. He asked about what happens when a man dies and his family members don't know that some of the goats and sheep in the household belong to the wife. And as part of the cultural practice that happens in some communities, the man's family come to take his assets. What happens if they come and take all the goats and sheep in the house and leave the woman with nothing? So such processes really trigger some mind change and influence changes that people are committed to take. There's a second, so just to add that, so beyond these dialogues, we do radio sensitization. That's guiding or influencing a positive image of the woman as a livestock keeper and the woman as a service provider in the sector. The second question from Doreen is about access to markets. And access to markets here, I speak specifically to the livestock sector in northern Ghana where we animals. So for a woman to sell her goats or chickens, she has to do it through her husband or another male relation in the community. And so as a result, they have close to zero knowledge about the market value of what they keep. And what she gets depends on what the man decides to give to her as what was sold in the market. So what we are doing, one, is through these dialogues, influencing a change in this practice, and also providing market information to these women and encouraging the men to do so, so that the women know the value of what they are keeping, so that if she's not even able to go and sell it out there herself, she knows that for this goat that is being sold, I expect $10. And so whoever is selling it on my behalf should bring back $10 to me.
You've seen who they are, the panelists, and there are posters at the back. More information about these projects and others that will come on. So I just want to bring this to a close. Can we please give them a bigger round of applause? Thank you very much. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edida, as well as the amazing panelists. So now we are going to have a short coffee break, not more than 30 minutes. We have a beautiful setup that has been put in place right outside. And I would request some of our distinguished guests to stay behind. We'll have a press conference. I'd also like to request members of the media to also stay behind. Remember, 30 minutes, let's all meet back here. We have more amazing sessions. We have more experts that will be sharing more insights when we come back. Thank you all. If we could kindly have Mr. Santiago come to the front. If we could also have Dr. Edida also come to the front, as well as the Executive Director of IPAR, Ms. Kaitesi Eugenie, Dr. Eric Hartner as well. You're welcome.
Okay. Yes, okay. Okay, yes, check the microphone, okay. No problem. Okay, yes, check microphone, okay, yes. Okay, yes, check microphone, yes, okay. Okay, yes, check microphone, Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. Check, check, mic, check, mic, check, mic, check, mic. Check, mic, check, mic. Check, mic, check, mic, check, 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 check. Channel 1, channel 2. Test. Test. Test.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Check microphone. Yes. Okay. Yes. Check microphone. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. Check microphone. Yes. Hello. Okay. 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 Yes. Check microphone. Yes. Hello. Okay. 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 Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so. Iriya bashobora kuba bagize Okay, yes, check sound. Okay, yes. Okay, okay, yes. Okay, check microphone. Yes. Hello. Okay. Yes. Okay, yes. Check microphone. Yes. Hello. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes. Check sound. Hello. Okay. Okay. Yes. Check sound. Hello. Okay.
Allô, 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 allô.
Et tout le monde vous m'entendez? Check mic.
Yes, okay, right. Check sound, sound check. Okay, right. Okay, yes, all right. Check sound, sound. Yes, okay, all right. Check sound. Check.
Mic check, mic check, mic check. Okay, I think the format that we're going to follow, we're going to give a few minutes to each of the different speakers who are seated here at the front to tell us a bit about the organization and what we do so that the media can know how to direct questions to the right person. I think I'll start with you, Mr. Santiago. Just give us a brief of what you do and the IDRC.
Thank you, Fiona. So Santiago Alba Corral, I'm the director of the Climate Resilient Food Systems Program within the International Development Research Center. So that is the Canadian arm to support research for developing countries in the search of solutions for a better planet. IDRC was founded in 1971, so 50 plus years of supporting research and researchers in the Global South in the search of social justice, climate resilience, economic development, global health, etc. Is that okay?
I know. none se ko avuga
icyiza
aravuga muvuga
reka tuzane umwe kuko sound niyo kibazo dufite
ariko si ikibazo cya sound aba bantu mwazanye badafite sound n'abantu
bafite ukuntu byivanze ukuntu
Check, 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 check.
Okay.
Dive into policy interventions that ensure sustained production and contribution of healthy and nutritious food. I would like you to help me welcome our moderator for this session, Professor Amos Njuguna. He is a professor at the United States International University in Nairobi. A round of applause as Professor Amos makes his way.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. We've enjoyed our break, so it's good time to start on policy engagement. And will be a very exciting session where we have two presentations followed by a panel discussion. So in the interest of time, I think I'll directly invite the first person to make the presentation. We have two of them, so they can just come here, but George can come here directly. So we have Dr. George Wamukoya, who is right here, and Dr. Antonina. Please be ready, and you can sit here so that after he finishes, you just take up. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning again. Good morning. Policy, you must be very happy. Otherwise, you can't deal with problems of our people. My name is George Wamkoya. I work with the African Group of Negotiators Expert Support. I was among the 11 co-facilitators that facilitated the Paris Agreement. I was responsible for the preamble, Article 2 and Article 3. So you can see that Article 2 is the purpose, which everyone is now citing. So that's where my space is. For now, also, I am the lead coordinator for the 134 G77 countries, the developing countries, on agriculture in the climate change negotiations. So I'm told I must deliver agriculture in Egypt. I hope I will. So I'm going to talk to you about a very exciting work that we do. First is acknowledge that science tells us that Africa is the most vulnerable continent and has contributed the least in terms of emissions. Which means, therefore, Africa's voice in the negotiations becomes critical. And it's on that basis that in 2008, the heads of states and government of the African Union decided that Africa must negotiate as a bloc. Why? Unlike the European Union, which can speak on behalf of its 27 member states now, African Union cannot speak on behalf of the 54 African countries by virtue of the treaty establishing it. And therefore, traditionally, countries negotiate based on their national positions. And you know the diversity in Africa. And so there was always some conflicting. And it's on that basis that a decision was made that we negotiate as a bloc. Second, the heads of state also made it very clear that they wanted agriculture in the negotiations because agriculture is one of the important sectors that is critical for the economy, but more importantly for the livelihoods of the people. And therefore, those two were the directions. Now, because of the direction that we got from the heads of state, the first thing is we had to find how do we get agriculture people to be involved in the negotiations, given that negotiations were a preserve of ministries of environment. And so the first thing we did was to, in 2009, to convene a meeting where we brought representatives from ministries of agriculture and scientists so that they are able to engage on the agenda and be able to formulate the action in that regard. As a result of that, we're proud to say that now we have almost all the countries in Africa represented at the COP in the agriculture negotiations by a person from Ministry of Agriculture and not from Environment. So that has been a very big change. The second is that in all the positions that we take, we must do a technical or background paper to generate evidence that informs the position that we take. Because you don't want to go in like it happened in 2009, where we were negotiating and we were saying adaptation is priority for Africa, and then they asked us, how much do you require? And we had no answer. That's how Prime Minister Meles and President Obama came about with 100 billion. There was no scientific basis as to how 100 billion came about in Copenhagen. So that is something that you need to be aware. Now, as a result of that and the tenacity and consistency, we've been able to build a very strong agriculture negotiating team for Africa. And it has been regarded, in fact, last June, our partner led by EU said the model that we started is being now replicated in Asian countries and also in Latin America. And that is very useful. But there's one thing that is important that I need to convey. Santiago. The project was 5 years, not 2 years, not 3 years. That's why we were able to demonstrate the progress that we've made. Consistency has led us to that. Finally, on that, the key products in the agriculture negotiations, what you normally hear, Coronivia joint work on agriculture, and the gender action plan, those were products from the Africa group, which were adopted by G77, brought to the table, and finally adopted as the decision. So that tells you how organized we are. But then we also realized that it's nice to negotiate, but you need to come down to the national level. How are we going to implement those policies? That's the vertical and the horizontal. And it's on that basis that we're working with 6 countries in Africa to develop long-term strategies so that they are able to feed into the economy-wide long-term strategies and net zero emissions. And we're very proud that in countries like Kenya, Uganda, where we did earlier, they have been able to use and to inform that process. Finally, it became very clear that, one, in the negotiations, new people are coming on board and they do not understand the process. In government, because of structural adjustment that were implemented, there is a gap between the senior and the junior, and many of them are not aware of these processes, and therefore we had to develop a training program which we call climate governance Diplomacy and Negotiations Leadership Program, and we've done it for the past 1 year, and we've trained over 500 professionals from across 50 countries in Africa, of which 75% are youth, 43% are women. Where do we see us going? We want to emphasize that science-driven policies are key to climate implementation in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And, Dr. Wamukoya, before you go, I have a quick question for you here. Because you've made a good presentation, you are talking about research presentation and the kind of work that you've done in the context of negotiations. But people are wondering, it takes too long, you know, embedding all these aspects of research, negotiation into policy. What can be done to create impact within a very short time? I heard you mention the 2 and 5 years, but stakeholders are very, very anxious and want quick results. And as you do that, how can the two be tied together to have very effective policy negotiation and climate implementation in Africa? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for a very good question. One, because COP comes every year and agriculture negotiations continues and new elements emerge, what happens is that before June session, we normally have what we call pre-subsidiary body session, where we bring scientists and the negotiators in the same room, and we discuss the agenda, and we identify what are those areas that require evidence, which then the scientists should be able to help us to package, and so that when we are drafting the Common Africa Position, it's informed by science. Second, like now we are going to the COP, we are actually having a meeting next week in Nairobi for the negotiators, agriculture negotiators, gender negotiators, and response measures negotiators, with both negotiators and experts, so that we look at the agenda and say, if Africa was to advance this position, where is the evidence to support that position? And then finally, what we normally do is we carry or we support some of the scientists to join the country delegations, and they are in the room when we are negotiating, and when an issue arises, then we are able to respond. And it was very exciting for me in June to see some of the people that have gone through the course being part of national delegations. And last week I was in Libreville for the African Climate Week, and I met 20 of the people that have gone through the course, and many of them have very interesting testimonies.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. It's important to note that Georgia has supported 12 countries to access climate finance from Green Climate Fund, and served as a climate advisor for the Comesa region for over 6 years. So it will be very interesting to have additional input and discussions with him when time permits. Please feel free to engage with George at your point. Next, we have Antonina. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Antonina Mutoro, and I'm a researcher at an organization called the African Population and Health Research Center in Nairobi. I'm going to talk about an initiative called the Food Systems Transformative Integrated Policy, or FSTIP in short. So what comes to mind when you think about food systems? I bet you think about a complex concept that's difficult to understand. But it basically means the movement of food from farm to fork, or from the point of production to the point where it lands on your plate. At the moment, as it has been highlighted by previous speakers, African food systems are currently unsustainable due to various challenges that have already been mentioned. And that's why food insecurity remains a challenge in Africa, as well as the high levels of food wastage and high food prices, which means that millions of Africans are currently not able to access healthy foods. Policies can potentially address these challenges, but they need to be informed by science. This will enable the policies to be able to address the situation or the challenges that are currently being faced, identify the people who are required to address these challenges, as well as identify the people who actually need interventions. So the Food Systems Integrated Policy, or FSTP in short, is an initiative that aims to use scientific information to change food system policies in African countries. The initiative has 3 main steps. The first one being an analysis of the current food system situation, mainly because you need to have an understanding of the situation before you can intervene. The second step is policy development, and the third one is scale up of the initiative to other countries. So, at the moment, only the first step, that is analysis of the food system situation, has been implemented, but there are plans to implement the other steps of the initiative. So the first step of the analysis of food systems happened in 3 countries. That was Malawi, Ghana, and Rwanda. And I'm sure you're wondering why these 3 countries. Well, the 3 countries were selected primarily because they have shown significant commitment to end hunger through agriculture, and they've also made significant gains in this front. So what happened during the analysis was that we conducted policy reviews to identify key stakeholders who are required for the implementation key policies, as well as implementation gaps within the food system. Apart from that, we also conducted a stakeholder mapping in order to identify the key stakeholders who are required for a proper functioning of a food system. There was also a component where key measures of food systems were identified in order to enable us to be, in order to be able to monitor changes or to measure changes within the food systems.
Thank you.
So the initiative, I'm not done yet, sorry. Okay. So at the end of the first step of the analysis process, a toolkit was developed, which is basically a one-stop shop that provides instructions on how you can actually conduct the analysis. And this toolkit can be used in other African countries. Given that FSTP is meant to be scaled up to other African countries, it was important to have an understanding of factors that made it successful. One of the factors was the availability of data that is regularly collected within the target countries. Apart from that, the involvement of local stakeholders was key, given that they were familiar with the food system situation in the country. Also, within the countries, there was ongoing food systems discussions, which is very important given the relatively complexity of the FSTP initiative. So the people involved in the process need to have an understanding of food systems in order to implement FSTP effectively.
Thank you. So please allow me to start from there directly, because you've mentioned Rwanda, Malawi, and Ghana. And so the question I would have for you is, what are the most critical policy changes that would be needed to create strong food systems in the region? And you may draw the case from your work in the 3 countries.
Okay. The key policy, the very first policy change that I would say is required is, first of all, just to have an understanding of what policies are currently available that address food system challenges. and then find a way to actually make sure that the policies speak to each other, because the policies within that food system are working towards a common gain. Yet, when it comes to policy development, the policymakers tend to work in silos. So just having an understanding of the policies that are available and how best to bring them together so that they work towards the same goal is key.
Thank you very much. So at this point, I'll call upon the other panelists who will come over. Then we can have a common discussion for all of us. And it's okay, you are free to go back to the audience so that we create space for the additional panelists. A round of applause for them. And please, let's also have questions from the audience coming so that we'll be able to present these questions and then feedback the answers. So now we will have a panel here, and this panel will be made up of experts from different areas. For example, we have Dr. Charles Buchagu, who is the Deputy Director General, Rwanda Agriculture and Animal Resources Development Board. Deputy Director Karibu, we can invite him. Please, a round of applause for him, for them, as they come. Two, we also have Peggy Mulewa, who is the Director Policy and Planning, Ministry of Agriculture in Zambia. So, Ms. Peggy, if you could just come over. Free sitting, please. Next, we do have one of the participants who benefited from the Cultivate Africa Future project too, who is with us to share insights to see how these programs feed into policy and generate meaningful benefits. So to this end, we have Mr. Samuel Thuo. You can please come up. Next, we have private sector players, because we also want to learn how the private sector intersects with policy. And we have from Syngenta, Jerome Baberon. Please, karibu sana. Next, we've got Dr. Susan Karia, who is the Director, Africa Women in Agricultural Research and Development Award. So, Susan, welcome. So I can see, we didn't plan how people will sit, so looks like I'll just throw, is that the deep end or the shallow end, to Samuel. And maybe, Samuel, I would want to invite you to just open the discussion for us. And in opening the discussion, you can take us through, we begin from the end, the uptake. Because we formulate policies, we end up having things running. So you are a beneficiary of this program. So how has uptake of different innovations that have been fed into policy assisted you to improve your productivity of your business? How has it led to improvement in your incomes, engagement with fellow youth, gender, and all that? Please take up from there.
Thank you so much, Prof. As you have heard, my name is Samuel Irungo from Kenya, and I've been a farmer. I do potatoes, Irish potatoes, and I've been selling those Irish potatoes to processors who process them into potato crisps. And basically, the innovation that we have accommodated as farmers in our area, we have decided to look about the seeds, getting to get the quality seeds as we farm. I believe that's a valuable innovation. We've also looked at improved farming methods to ensure that we also increase the yields that we get from our farms. So we also have decided to set up, as a business, myself have decided to set up a potato value addition facility to increase my penetration to the market and increase the various sources of income. So I can say that innovation-wise, this has helped to increase yields like 50% of what we had before we decided to venture into these innovations. Secondly, it has also helped us to engage with our clients, particularly the processors, and we have been able to realize that there are varieties they need for their products. Remember, they are processing potatoes for quite a wide market, so they need good quality products for their potato crisps. So as a raw material provider, we have ventured in getting the right seeds, right varieties, so that we can be able to increase the market, the penetration in the market, and the acceptability of our products as well. So by innovation, I would say we have increased the yields by 50%, basically from how we used to work. And I've also realized that market-wise, we have penetrated the market and increased the market penetration by around 20 or 30% through the innovations that we have decided to venture into. And also in productivity, I would say like over 40% of our products have accessed the market previously we did not have access to.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Samuel. And I want to come to Susan, just jump over and picking from where Samuel left about the disparities, the issues that he's talking about, that some of these interventions have affected youth, have affected women, and it's undeniable that certain transformative programs have been undertaken, and we've had that the whole day today. But then gender inequalities still persist. What's the cause? What's the cause? Why? And what do we need to do? Moving on, and how can we address this?
Is this on? No. What do I? Oops. I tried this out. Hello? You can hear me? Okay. Thank you very much for the question. I think I want to start off by saying that we should not be so pessimistic. Yeah? A lot has changed.
Yes.
A lot has changed in the narrative. You heard Edida's speech today. She said if you submit a proposal to IDRC and it doesn't address gender substantially, you will not be funded. This is language that was not there many years ago. Yeah? So a lot has changed. If you look at the CGIAR, a couple of years ago, I worked with them. I started actually my career with them. And I was working for a program called the Participatory Research and Gender Analysis Program that was meant to integrate gender within the CG. Participatory research worked, participatory variety selection worked, the gender part never worked. And very quickly, they closed the program. If you look at the CG now, they have gender scientists in all the centers. They have a gender platform addressing gender, so there is a lot that has changed. Of course, the issues still continue. We must admit there are still substantial gender inequalities, but I was also very encouraged when I was listening to the grantees of IDRC and the work that they are doing, because actually they are completely on the right track.
what we need to do is continue to do some of these important things. And what are they? I think the first one is we need to recognize that gender equality or doing gender is more than targeting women alone. Yeah? You need to bring other people into that space. But also, you need to do what one of my good friends, Dr. Jemima Njoki, says, that we need to stop fixing women, and we need to fix the institutions and the services to make them, she uses a word called womanable. It hasn't yet caught, but I think it's important. But I think it's what Dr. Helen was talking about when she said they have women-centered services where they are training women to be animal health workers. So that's one. The second thing is Agnes talked about gender transformative approaches. You really need to think how to shift the mindsets, how to shift these negative sociocultural norms that reproduce inequalities. No, don't stop me. Just but I will go there. I will. And then I think it's really important to look at the institutions, the ARD institutions themselves, and to see how you can make them much more gender responsive in their policies and in their practice. And this is one of the programs that Award has. It's called Gender Responsive Agriculture Research ARD institutions. And it's really strengthening their capacity and making sure their workplace policies and the research that they're doing definitely addresses gender. The next one is on data. To date, we still cannot really say how we are doing in terms of all the SDGs on gender because we don't have the data. And data at the individual level, data on who owns the livestock, who owns which assets, who owns land, who does which activities. But now there are programs that are actually pulling together this kind of data. There is a work that's being done by IFPRI on IFPRI and USAID on the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index that's collecting very good data that can inform us. And finally, I think it's really important that we look at the policies themselves and make sure that the policies are actually responsive to gender and that we are addressing the gender gaps. When I was listening to the previous presentation and she talked about doing a landscape analysis of policy, I was thinking, I hope that landscape analysis is also paying attention to the gaps in gender within the policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that eloquent presentation. And I'll now pick on Jeremy from the private sector now. Syngenta has been here with us for many years. The story of agriculture cannot be said without punctuating with Syngenta at some point. So, and I would want to hear from you, listening to what Samuel was talking about, improving his productivity and the potato, the seed improvement in seed quality, and what Susan has talked about. Now, what kind of strategic partnerships should private sectors come up with? And you can give us your experiences of the kind of strategic partnerships that you've formed with entrepreneurs, with governments to be able to enhance and contribute to policy and your programs.
Let me do that, but first of all, can you hear me, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. And I try to go fast. First of all, it feels very good to be here in person and seeing you face to face and having a chat on the side. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for this already. Second, it feels even better to hear about science and scientific evidence supporting policy decision and supporting a big decision to implement the change in the food systems that is dearly needed, starting in Africa. I will want to conclude with the words of Kofi Annan, but I cannot wait. When he said that Africa is part of the solution and not the problem, and agriculture in Africa is part of the solution, not part of the problem, I strongly believe it is the case, because I believe in innovation, right? I mean, we are the private sector, yes. I'm the president of Syngenta Africa Middle East. Been present 50 years in 27 countries in Africa. I'm also, as it happens, the president of the Industry Association. So I will be speaking with two hats, but the messages are aligned. We are innovation powerhouses. 1 in 5 people in our organization are scientists. by training. So we bring innovation in seeds. We are the third company in the world in crop protection. We are the leader to promote more sustainable, productive, and by sustainable I mean for the environment, for biodiversity, to fight against deforestation, but also from an economic standpoint to promote an upgrade in the life of the commercial farmers, pre-commercial smallholders, right? I mean, that's our mission, and that's what we do. And we see it working everywhere. When you talk about partner, we don't do that on our own, right? Because reaching the size we need to reach, we need the support from the policies, from the policymakers, and from the people who have the right approach to be able to provide the right training to the farmers, the right access to the market. Maybe two more comments. First one, with my industry hat, in February, I was privileged to be invited to participate to a roundtable of the Africa-European Union Business Summit in Brussels, and we had this very discussion around which policies, right? Because we have been talking about the farm to fork and the Green Deal in Europe, and we wanted to make it clear because we hear also the farmers from Africa telling us, of course we want it and we need more, because there is no way we produce more by accelerating deforestation, right? We want to produce more with better education, better input, better management of the farm. So let's do that, but let's base it on an Africa transition towards a Green Deal, not a Belgium-based version, right? Because when you forbid products or techniques in sugar beet, for instance, in Northern Europe, does it mean they should no longer be available in coffee in Kenya? If the risk means 70% of the harvest loss, right? These kind of things. So, of course, the first message I could share with the policymakers was to echo the message from the farmers in Africa. We need to localize the Green Deal. And the Green Deal, there needs to be a localized Green Deal for Africa, right? Science-based, based on real database decision. The second one is more specific to my industry on the crop protection side. There is a need, and Brussels has been sensitive to it, and we need to keep working with the governments on this to fight illegal products, illegal, illicit products. Those, in some countries, they can represent nearly, we don't know how much, but 25 or 30% of the market, which is incredible when you think that this is sub-quality, can be dangerous, not assessed properly. So dangerous for the economics of the farm, dangerous for the health of the farmers, possibly consumers. This is bad. So we need, pretty much like was done in Europe or North America or Asia, or in Europe with Europol, some stronger initiatives to tackle this. I mean, it's a specific issue, but that's a big one, and there is a big policy impact. The third and final one would be around trade. I will talk about the Continental Free Trade Area, but not only. Of course, trade for the farmers, so the access to the market, yes, but the trade between countries in Africa a lot more than before. I don't know if you're aware of the numbers, but there's been a study released that says that 16% of the international trade in Africa of the international trade is across African countries. You compare that with, I think, 52 in the US, and if you take Europe, you're talking about 67%, right?
Thank you.
Final comment on that one, sorry. Sub-Saharan Africa every year spends more than $40 billion importing food from outside Africa, right? If you think that a portion of this could be invested in promoting better systems, training, infrastructures, education, processing within Africa, that would be a fantastic impact already.
Right. Thank you very much. And I'll just pick from there. Peggy, he's talked about localization, he's talked about investments in all these processes and systems and all that. But we know that investments, especially in African countries, has been quite low. With regard to everything that we are talking about, up to and including the policy entrenchment of this aspect, what vision does Zambia has over you know, this aspect of ensuring that there are investments that are made, which then create the much needed impact.
Hello?
We can hear you well, and you can also keep looking at me so that when I signal, you see me.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think the debate has been very rich. A number of areas have been highlighted, and I think as policy makers, one thing I should say is that as we are coining policies, we must make sure that they are very comprehensive and inclusive. I think most of the times why we've got it wrong is because we, like somebody said, we work in silos, and we tend to focus on our area alone. But as Zambia, going forward, we have actually embarked on a transformative approach towards agriculture, because agriculture has been identified as the driver of economic development and enabler to transformation and economic growth, as well as job creation. We have recognized that agriculture, I think, is the only sector that stands for us to actually unlock the jobs that we need for the youth to avoid any further disruption in the national development. So what we have done is to come up with what we're calling a comprehensive agriculture support program or transformation program. Under that, we have actually brought on board every other sector, every other ministry. They are part of the development and unlocking the potential that agriculture has. Why am I saying so? Because if you are looking at the nutrition, dealing with the nutrition and health of the people, you need to approach it from that point of view, because agriculture, we are best placed in terms of producing. But when it comes to the agro-processing, which we need very much to unlock those jobs and also to ensure that the farmer has sufficient income, selling or trading in primary products hasn't really given the farmer the amount of income that they need to transform their welfare and also address other challenges such as health. I think it has brought up by others. So we have created a platform where we can bring together all players, including the private sector and the farmers themselves. They must sit on that table and be consulted in terms of what it is that they want. In terms of the nutritional needs, the health sector needs to come in. The education sector needs to also come in so that we start including them at an early stage before we reach the position of coming up with the appropriate interventions. When we sit together on that platform, then only we'll be able to address the gaps that are needed to address those challenges that we need. For instance, when it comes to research, in our country, we've now decided, after consultations, we've seen the need to create a ministry that will address the issues of technology and innovation. And that will also work together with the Ministry of Agriculture to deal with the challenges of innovation and technology within the agriculture sector. Coming to the issues of climate change, we have set up, after consultations, we've set up what we're calling a Ministry of Green Economy. We're working closely with them in addressing the issues of climate change. In the last season we had, farming season, we did encounter quite diverse experiences with respect to climate change. In other areas we had floods. In other areas we had droughts. So we need the interventions to also address those issues that might impede or affect the production of good and healthy nutrition. Coming to the issue of also our friends in the nutrition sector, we are working closely with them. We've come up with varieties that will address, seed varieties that will address the nutrition deficiencies, such as vitamin A fortified products and seeds, and also zinc and others that we have identified as challenges and gaps within the nutritional needs of our people. Coming to the education sector, we've come up with a compendium or a manual that is informing nutritionists in terms of how to prepare those foods that using locally produced goods that will address the nutritional gaps of our people. So you can see that from the start, you need to include everybody, every sector that, and every player in the nation that will contribute. It's not a game for the Ministry of Agriculture alone, but it's a concerted effort of different players, including the farmers.
True.
And this is just the last one. One of the issues that I've also noticed that you have not talked about people with differently abled. For us, we've discovered that in one of the provinces, southern province, in the previous season, the person or the farmer that contributed the highest production was somebody from a differently abled category. We normally don't look at them as people that can be productive and produce to contribute to the national needs. But I can assure you from the experience of Zambia, they are very critical players. And so when we're looking at innovation, we need to plan for them and see how we can actually bring them on board and also help them and support them to produce effectively. As well as the women, I'm happy that I think Ghana and a few others mentioned the aspect of value addition. We in Zambia have actually equipped the women using support from the cooperating partners as well as our own support to empower them with small implements that they can use to transform the peanuts into peanut butter and other products that they can sell and also add to their nutritional needs.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's exciting to hear very good things happening in Africa. And picking from the comprehensive programs that you have and connecting that with Dr. Charles Bukaga, who is right here, the Deputy Director General, Rwanda Agricultural and Animal Resources Development Board. This comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, what strides have Rwanda made?
Thank you very much, and apology for being late. I was actually attending another panel discussion. Well, as far as Rwanda is concerned, we have made very good progress in terms of implementing CADEC target. Mainly, some strategy were put in place, including trying really to align with the CADAP strategy together with our own policies. So make sure Rwanda policy strategy align with the continental commitment, but also a lot of effort has been made to make sure that we conduct a successful biennial review for data collection process. I must also say that in terms of budget allocation, this is actually streamlined with the internal policies and agriculture budgeting. So the 10% is actually weighted in the national output, including infrastructure, all the sectors. This is on why we were be able to meet the target. So briefly is really to be able to take the CADAP target and be able to streamline with our own policies and the strategies. That is how we came up with this result. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that contribution, which ties up with what is happening in Zambia. So possibly we can have one or two questions from the audience. But as we do that, I would still want to take it to Susan. How do we walk the talk as we pick the questions from the audience?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that question. How do we walk the talk? I think what I should say is that we have a lot of technologies, we have a lot of information now, and we've moved forward. The trick now is to put it all together so that we can make progress. And here I talk about progress, for example, in terms of gender. One of the lessons that we learned, we've been learning and we continue to learn, is that when you work with women and you're trying to improve their livelihoods, you cannot do one intervention. You know, you can't say, oh, the most important thing is land. No, you have to do land, you have to do empowerment, you have to do women's leadership, because comprehensively that's what makes change. And if you don't do that, one of our biggest lessons was we had a program that was doing economic empowerment. Women had the livestock, they were feeding, they were making money. Their work burden had increased tremendously. So you really must look at multiple interventions at the same time, because women suffer multiple vulnerabilities.
Thank you. Ed Samuel, as we pick the question from the audience, you are an ed user. We, all of us here, are serving the ed user. All of us, as you can hear. What are the main issues you are struggling with that you want researchers in the room to address, policymakers seated here to address? What are these issues in less than 1 minute?
Thank you. One of the main issues that are posing as a challenge to us, the end user, is that the African continent is based with unreliable weather, and mostly the agricultural practices that we do are rain-fed. And now you find that when the rain fails, like currently in Kenya, we're experiencing such kind of a drought, you find that the yields from the farms are very low. And to compensate for that, the farmer tries to sell the products as for the highest bidder or the highest prices possible. And now, in our processor's point of view, it is becoming highly impossible for the processor to increase the price based on his also cost of productions. So you find that we are at a very precarious situation where the farmer tries to get a lot for his input, but it's not possible because the end user of the input also has cost which he wants or he or she wants to bring down. So I would like to pose a challenge, especially to the governments and policymakers in Africa, to try and move away from the rain-fed agriculture and also empower the farmers to try to increase their yields per plot in the farm. That will bring the cost of producing this farm produce is low, and then the prices for the products will also be low, and you'll also find that you will be able to be competitive in the market as pertains to the price of your product. Because right now, getting to break even as a farmer is it's a bit hard. Thank you.
Thank you. I've heard that those of us in this room should start focusing on cost efficiency, technology in farming, and competitiveness and markets at some point. Let's get to the audience. I'm told they're ready. There was a question from the audience. Who had the mic here?
Bonjour. Bonjour. Je m'excuse parce que j'ai quitté une descente très loin, j'ai quitté le Burkina Faso. Je devrais être là très tôt, je n'ai pas pu assister la matinée. Je devrais aller prendre mon badge de l'autre côté, faire le test Covid avant de venir. Bon, pour moi, je n'ai pas pu assister, c'est vrai, les premières présentations, mais à travers ce qui vient de se présenter tout de suite, j'ai un peu de préoccupation et je voulais profiter de l'occasion pour partager un peu mon espérance et voir comment, à travers IDRC, CRD, DI, qu'est-ce qu'ils peuvent faire avec le secteur privé aujourd'hui. Parce que quand on parle
de la transformation de l'agriculture et de l'autosuffisance alimentaire, il faudra penser effectivement au secteur privé. Parce que plus on parle des gouvernements, on parle des organisations associatives, on connaît des limites aussi à ce niveau. Quand vous prenez les gouvernements, ils ont des limites, ils ont des préférences parfois. Au niveau des associations aussi, vous savez qu'il y a certaines associations, les leaders à un moment donné ne font plus l'affaire des autres qui sont en bas, donc ils ont tendance à casser le système. Et là, ça ne permet pas aux agro-dealers de développer des systèmes qui vont les permettre, surtout les transformateurs, qui vont les permettre de disponibiliser la matière première de qualité en semences, en engrais et tout ce qui s'ensuit. J'ai juste énuméré quelques points que je vais partager parce que je me dis, tous ceux qui sont dans cette salle, il y en a qui en ont besoin. Il y en a peut-être qui ont les mêmes difficultés aussi. Et il y en a qui n'ont pas ces difficultés, mais ils ne savaient pas que ça aussi, ça peut arriver du jour au lendemain. Puisque ça diffère d'un pays à l'autre. Donc l'exemple que je voulais donner ici, j'ai parlé rapidement en regardant pour parler des changements climatiques. Ça, c'est un problème, c'est un fléau qui entame aujourd'hui, même en Afrique, on sent ça un peu partout. Vous avez le problème lié également. Bon, je ne me suis pas présenté. Je pense que j'ai fait déjà une erreur à ce niveau. Je me nomme Tangongose Yamin. Je suis président d'associations. Bon, plusieurs associations. Si vous avez entendu en temps au Burkina, on parlait d'une association de grossistes et des temps d'intrants agricoles appelée Agrodia, qui a innové pendant un temps. Aujourd'hui, j'ai quitté la direction juste il y a 2 mois de cela. Et je suis dans mes propres entreprises où la société s'appelle Établissement Tangongose Wamatié, ETW Agri-Invest, que je me suis inscrit. Depuis 2020, je suis dans l'agro-business, disons d'abord dans les intrants, tout ce qui est semences, engrais, pesticides aujourd'hui, où j'ai muté maintenant vers la transformation, où je fais la transformation du riz. Donc j'ai une unité de transformation du riz aujourd'hui qui me permet de produire avec les producteurs et de transformer en riz national aujourd'hui. Mais le problème, donc j'ai expliqué ici rapidement, c'est le coût, c'est-à-dire énumérer les problèmes de l'Afrique aujourd'hui. Le coût de production, c'est un fléau, parce que quand vous regardez partout, un peu partout, vous regardez, vous avez un problème sur la production. Soit c'est les intrants qui sont chers, soit c'est la semence qui n'est pas de qualité, soit c'est la main-d'œuvre, tous ces éléments jouent. Vous avez le coût de l'énergie, vous avez le coût de transport pour certains pays, vous avez la qualité des semences, la qualité des intrants, le coût de crédit. Parce que le crédit que nous prenons pour vraiment innover dans l'agro-business, ce n'est pas des crédits compétitifs avec des taux qui nous permettent de développer notre truc. Vous avez la politique des États. Ça, vraiment, c'est des problèmes. Bon, je ne sais comment faire parce que le temps ne me permet pas de tout développer, mais s'il y a un chrono vraiment pour expliquer, vous allez voir qu'il y a des solutions qu'on pourra trouver ensemble parce que j'ai même énuméré des solutions aussi dedans.
Thank you.
Merci bien.
Thank you very much. We've got the issues very well, and I'll just turn over the mic for an immediate response as we wind up.
Thank you very much. I think our colleagues from Burkina Faso has highlighted a number of issues that are very critical as far as African continent is concerned. One is the climate change. This is a global challenges that we need to be able to mitigate. And I think we have mitigation strategies that are well known to all of us. We have, for instance, research be able to avail drought tolerant that can adapt to climate change. And as for Rwanda, of course, for instance, we have now developed our own maize seed that are adapted to drought situation. And we have actually stopped the importing maize from outside. This is a milestone. Secondly, these other technologies that are available, I can say agroforestry technology, for instance. This is some of the technology that can help to mitigate. But also some other irrigation, water retention, that is something that are actually part of what we are doing as for Rwanda and the part of our strategic plan for agricultural transformation. So, and this is something that can apply to other countries as well. Yeah, see, he has also touched on the issue of quality of input. It's very, very important. If you talk about seed, for instance, how do we make sure our farmers access quality seed? We know a lot is happening. For instance, for Rwanda, we are privatizing the sector. We are no longer in RAB, Ministry of Agriculture, is no longer in seed trade. So the entire production process, the entire production processing and marketing is fully in the hands of private sector. But what the government do in terms of making place control mechanism to make sure that the private sector is doing the right things and there is no issue with the going through fraudulent mechanism to make sure. So that is the role of government, enabling environment, regulatory framework, but to make sure that the control is done all the way along the value chain and make sure farmers get the correct the input. The last issue was the bank loan, how our farmers are getting affordable loans from financial mechanisms. This is a very, very critical issue, probably need more discussions, engaging in discussion with the banking system to make sure agriculture practitioners access affordable loans. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That's all we had time for today, but I can allow Jeremy to simply close us up as we start walking in less than 1 minute.
In less than 1 minute, I can't do it. Now, I think just maybe to bounce back on the previous question, the very last one on cost. I agree with you, but if you think about it, farmers are private sector. I mean, farmers are entrepreneurs, right, most of the time. So I think it is always right to bet on the farmers, provide them with the right policy framework, which is going to facilitate adoption of technology, the right technology. An example I have is a herbicide we introduced last year in Nigeria. And then Nigeria imports 46% of their rice, and we introduced a new herbicide. They diminished the cost by 50% per hectare, increased the yield by 25%, right? Massive. So there are technological solutions. The policy frameworks enabled it. But the big multiplier effect will be trade. As I said, making sure that trade can happen. You know, we diminish the non-tariff barriers in particular of trade between countries. That will be a huge multiplier effect. I don't know if you read the analysis of the World Bank, which says that the continental free trade area by 2035 will improve the value capture in Africa, for Africa, by $450 billion by removing the non-tariff barriers. And these are core to the future of the continent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll continue interacting with the panel. Asante.
Thank you so much, Professor Amos Njuguna, as well as our amazing panelists for this insights that they have shared on policy interventions. We're now going to dive right into scaling for impact. And I'd like you to help me welcome our moderator, as well as the panelists as they get ready to hit the stage. Help me welcome Dr. Eric Hartner, Crops Research Program Manager at the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this important discussion. I'd like to invite the speakers of that last morning session. Dr. Chrysanthus Tanga, please come to the stage. Chrysanthus is from ICIPE, which is the research center in Nairobi working on insects. And he will talk to us about the development of insects for feed. Dr. Moses Odeke, who is working with Asareka, please come to the stage. And Moses is going to discuss with us the requirement for scaling innovation successfully, the opportunities for action. And Dr. Petronella Chaminuka, please, Petronella, come to the stage. Petronella is from the Agricultural Research Council of South Africa, and she will talk to us about scaling science initiative. So I give the floor now to Chrysanthus to give his presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol respected. I'm called Chrysanthus Tanga. I'm a research scientist working with the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology. I'll present on the project Insect Feed for Livestock and Fish Production. In the past decade, we have experienced enormous decline in the production of livestock and fish, and this is partly due to increased cost of feed, and this is attributed to the major source of protein, which are quite expensive and are also scarce. And this sort of protein includes soya meal and fish meal that are being used in animal feed production. Despite these challenges, the demand for meat consumption continues to increase at a rate of 1.9% per year. That is close to 2 times the growth of the human population. And this is also accompanied by a significant increase in a feed demand. If we look at the records of 2018, we required 1.1 billion tons of feed to produce meat for the growing population. If you come to think about it, that means about 4/5 of the agricultural land will be devoted for livestock production. This means if we continue to go at this rate, therefore it is very clear that this is really going to be unsustainable. And therefore we need to start a rethink of other alternative options. And that is where this project comes in, where ECP and Makerere University, together with other relevant partners, have been using a circular economic approach to be able to recycle organic waste into high-value products. In this project, our focus was on protein, where we see that you can recycle organic waste to produce high-quality protein for animal feed. And we've got several testimonies from farmers where they've used this feed on farm, with women farmers actually testifying that the use of insect-based feed can increase egg production by 15% compared to conventional-based feeds. It also increase the nutritional quality, and we see a significant increase in the nutritional quality of this product. Other farmers, like pig farmers, have seen their pig grow to market size 1.5 to 2 months much earlier. That's saving income, labor, and therefore increasing profitability of the smallholder farmers. A clear example of what we did is socioeconomic and impact assessment of this technology for poultry production in Kenya alone clearly established that if we are able just to adopt 5 to 50% of insect-based feed in animal feed production, we will be able to free maize, soya beans, and fish meal that would be able to feed close to 4.8 million people. This is a significant contribution to the food and nutrition security of the continent. Now, other beautiful products that we developed within this context was the frass fertilizer. And this product is extremely rich in nutrients and has clearly demonstrated that when you use this to amend the soil, we increase the soil fertility, we improve crop yield for different crops like vegetable and maize at a rate of 15 to 25% production levels. And we have companies like Safi Organic Limited that are already using this product. It's already marketed. We have Synergy Limited also producing Evergrow that is also in the market because of the high quality of this product. And this frass fertilizer also helps to control certain diseases in the soil, like the fusarium. You also have the wheel diseases in tomatoes and many others. And we have seen a significant improvement in controlling nematodes at a rate of over 90% when we do an inventory studies, and we are moving the study next to the field. Another third product is the oil. Insects contain more than 30 to 40% oil, which is much more higher than most plant-based sources. Therefore, we need to take advantage of this oil. Because we have testified with the private sector, Synergy, to show that this oil from insects are very important feedstock for biodiesel production. They are also excellent additive for cosmetics and soap production, and can also be used as adjuvant in mosquito repellent. Now, a fourth product is a chitin. This is a high-level product with high opportunities to be used in pharmaceuticals as well as cosmetic industry. We also have the aspect of the briquette that is being produced by Synergy. That means we are almost going green, whereby it's almost going to near zero production of reducing the waste into high-value products. Now, over the time with this technology, we've been able to train over 11,000 farmers within 3 years, and we have over 1,000 small to medium-scale enterprises already making money from this sector. A clear example is Insecti Pro, a young girl at the age of 23 that left school after her first degree, came to learn about insects. Now it's a multi-million industry in Kenya, and they're producing more than 3,000 tons of insects per year. And this is a very, very important opportunity that we have seen with other sectors. Then, this wouldn't have been possible without the policy. We have been working very closely with the policymakers in the East African countries, and we've seen policy clearly established in Kenya and Uganda, and Rwanda in March launched the first standards in Rwanda. Tanzania has also followed. These policies are extremely important because they create an enabling environment for business opportunities and also for trust in terms of investment. And over this time, we've also seen areas where these, the products that have been developed from this project are also being certified, creating a greater opportunity for international trade of this product. So this is to tell you that this project is extremely scalable, and we are very, very lucky that we did a second phase of this project. We had an opportunity from the Australian Center for International Agricultural Research being able to fund the third phase of this project with the idea of scaling out this now to Rwanda and to other nearby countries like Burundi as well as Tanzania. We are also happy with the fact that this donor is also looking at harmonizing policy within the continent to create a more bigger impact for the entire African continent. I would like also to take the opportunity to say that there's also a significant spillover of this project. I started working in this project when I was just a small boy, a postdoctoral fellow. I moved to a scientist, I moved to a senior scientist, and I'm now the head of Institute of Food, Feed, and other uses program. So I strongly encourage that we continue to fund this effort to be able to create greater job opportunities for our youth in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite Dr. Moses Odike to the stage?
Good afternoon. My name is Moses Odeke. I work for Association for Strengthening Agricultural Research in Eastern Central Africa, in brief, ASORECA. ASORECA is based in Entebbe, Uganda, and our core business is basically agricultural research for development. And so ASORECA has been implementing a number of interventions in area 4D aimed at scaling up interventions, agricultural interventions and innovations. I would like to talk briefly about what we've done and the lessons that we've learned so far. ASORECA's interventions in agricultural research for development are guided by 4 key investment areas. The first one is on capacity strengthening of research scholars, and then the second one is on technology transfer and dissemination, and then the third one is on enabling policy, market access, and trade. And then the fourth one is on knowledge and information management. Now, scaling interventions within ASORECA are anchored within the thematic area number 2. And for us in ASORECA, we look at scaling as expanding, replicating, adapting, and sustaining successful interventions, projects, programs, and policies in a wider geographical area over time to benefit more people. Our strategy is simple. It's about enhancing partnerships, enhancing access to markets, facilitating access to knowledge and information, and building the capacities of our scaling partners, and also putting in place monitoring and evaluation systems that are critical for ensuring reflection and learning, as well as tracking the impacts of the scaling interventions. Now, over time, we've noted that there are certain critical factors that ensure the success of the scaling process. Some of these include existence of a proven technology, availability of effective partnerships, being able to identify the drivers and barriers to scaling up, as well as identifying an effective pathway for scaling up. Also, engagement with the private sector is very important, and as well as availability of resources to be able to support implementation of scaling up interventions. With regards to the private sector, we are very intentional in the way we engage with the private sector. Intentional in the sense that we want to engage the private sector to be able to commercialize the technologies that we're promoting. And also, we engage with the private sector in order to be able to link the producers that we work with to the markets. And then also the private sector is very critical in ensuring that the input, supply, and distribution channels are functioning and working well. And that ensures that our farmers, our producers are able to access the technologies that they need to adopt. With regards to the lessons that we've learned so far, there are a couple of them. I think the first one that stands out is that we need to have a proven technology that is scalable for any scaling intervention to be successful. We also need government support, because then government support will ensure sustainability of the interventions. And by government support, I mean things like provision of credit, provision of incentives, especially in terms of targeted subsidies, as well as favorable tax regimes, provision of supportive infrastructure, such as feeder roads for linking farmers to the markets, provision of marketing innovations, such as warehouse receipt systems, and so forth. The other very critical lesson is that long-lasting interventions are very critical in terms of ensuring that we have a sustainable change. And then partnerships is also very important, being able to have effective partnerships with partners such as NGOs, civil society organizations, farmer organizations, as well as national agricultural research institutions, is very critical in ensuring that the scaling up process is successful. The other lesson that we've learned is that the role of the policymakers, both local and high-level policymakers, is critical in mobilizing communities to adopt technologies. One statement from a policymaker can make a big difference. Last but not least, engagement of the private sector. The private sector is special in the sense that the private sector has the capacity and the potential to be able to invest in scaling up the technology, as long as there's a business case to it. And so we have been engaging with the private sector because we know that the private sector, if they invest in the scaling of the technology, can contribute to the sustainability of the interventions. We have implemented a number of scaling projects, but I would like to share an example of where we implemented a project on upscaling the adoption of Nerika rice technologies in South Sudan, where we were responding to a challenge of food insecurity that was threatening the livelihoods and the lives of thousands of farmers in that part of the world. So we partnered with the private sector to build the community seed systems and also train the farmers in producing the quality declared seed, as well as building effective input, supply, and distribution channels. In that project, we partnered with the private sector to transfer the Nerika rice technologies. We were able to produce over 10 metric tons of quality declared seed. The farmers that were engaged in this particular project were able to produce surplus quantities of the Nerika rice that they were able to sell, but also improve on their food security situation. The income that the farmers got, the farmers were able to buy assets like livestock, bicycles, motorbikes, as well as being able to take their children back to school.
Can you wrap up, please?
So
your time is finished.
That's the kind of change that scaling up of interventions can create if it is done in a proper manner. And so to us, we are very passionate about working with the private sector because then we know the capacity and the potential that the private sector has in scaling up the technologies. Actually, for us, we think that the private sector has been or is the missing link in solving the scaling puzzle. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can I invite now Petronella to the stage to give us her talk on the Scaling Science Initiative?
A few weeks ago, I was in a meeting with my colleagues that are responsible for developing livestock vaccines in my organization, and a funder that had approached us who wanted them to put together a proposal to develop a program around thermostability in vaccines, livestock vaccines. So I then said to this funder, would you welcome the idea for me and my team to also integrate into this request, the proposal that will be submitted, issues around gender integration, and also research that would enable us to do an impact evaluation as well as understanding exactly what are the farmer preferences with regards to livestock vaccines. Because I had just published with one of my students 2 years ago a study that showed that for farmers in South Africa, thermostability in livestock vaccines was not really the greatest attribute that they desired for, but rather they were looking for a vaccine that would have multivalency, so maybe 2 or 3 diseases being addressed through one vaccine. And this funder just bluntly said to me, what you're proposing is not science. I'm not going to put my money there. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Petronella Chaminuka, and I work for South Africa's Agricultural Research Council. I'm responsible for facilitating impact and partnerships in my organization. Since this morning, you've heard a lot about the great work that is being done on the continent. And this work is based on solid science. Bit by bit, we are able to deliver solutions to farmers on the ground. But pilot projects succeed, but they don't scale. So what I want to talk to you about this morning is scaling impact, and particularly for the public good. If the intervention is to address issues like environmental degradation, food insecurity, how do we scale that? My colleagues have also spoken about scaling, but more from a private good kind of perspective. So we've had all these solutions. The big question is, so what? Africa remains hungry. More than 280 million of our population suffers from hunger. Recent analysis also shows that agricultural productivity growth in Africa in the last 10 years has been mainly because of expansion of land under agriculture. And yet in other regions, they are realizing that agricultural productivity growth from input intensification. So we are developing all these great technologies and innovations, but somewhere I think there is a gap that exists. We are not able to translate this into impact for our people. And if we continue on this trajectory, it's going to be difficult for us to realize Agenda 2063 as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. So I want to ask today, how do we move Africa from these numerous, fragmented, but successful pilot projects towards impact at scale? And like I said, particularly for the public good. So a team of experts from the Global South, it's not an exhaustive list of experts, we were brought together by the IDRC between 2020 and 2021, and over a number of months, we deliberated on this issue and also shared best practices And eventually what we realized is that we'd shared so much, we'd also come up with a lot of information that we felt we needed to communicate that information, particularly in as far as it goes to informing the decisions that are made with regards to funding, research and innovation. So we developed this call to action that has 8 points. It's mainly directed at funders for research, but it also bears relevance to researchers and innovators and development agencies. So because of time, I'm not going to go into the 8 actions. I'm just going to focus on 3 of these actions. The first one that we've proposed is that there is a need to keep a focus on impact, because we don't really scale innovations. What we scale is the positive impact of those innovations. And not all impact is positive, by the way. So we also need to ask the questions, who are we targeting with regards to our intervention? And what exactly is the impact of that intervention on different groups of people? So interrogating these kinds of questions, but keeping our focus on the goal of scaling impact is essential in terms of how we make decisions around project funding, as well as the duration of the projects that are funded. We heard earlier today that 3 years, 2-3 years is not enough to be able to realize impact. So that also speaks to the funders and the researchers in terms of how we can be able to move from the pilot to the impact going forward. The second point that I want to highlight from the call is the realization that bigger is not always better. Scale means different things in different contexts. So we need to also just take into consideration that. But more importantly, we want impact to be targeted and to also be inclusive of issues around the environment, social justice, as well as poverty. So we really need to be very clear what it is that we want to achieve in terms of these projects. And then thirdly, we also have a lot of learning and experiences that have come from the Global South. So we also appeal to funders to support and to fund Southern solutions for Southern problems. So we need also some support for amplifying Global South voices and for developing capacity for scaling science in the Global South. Because the truth is nobody really has the answers. We are all learning, and I'm sure from what we've had so far this morning is there's continual need for developing capacity. And we call on funders to be able to integrate that as well in terms of the decisions that they make around scaling and supporting projects. So the call to action, like I said, highlights 8 actions, and what it requires is actually a change in practice. We should look at being people-focused, as well as, environment-focused, and focusing on issues around social justice as well, and encouraging participatory approaches. So finally, the last message that I want to pass is that for all of us that have been engaged in these great initiatives and the partners that have supported them, the responsibility to take us to impact at scale lies with each and every one of us. So please read this call and join the movement to take Africa to the next stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this rousing end. I will now open the session for discussion with the audience. So please start thinking of your question for the panel. And while I expect many questions to flow, I will initiate the discussion by asking Dr. Tanga, since you were the first to talk. You explained that the technology is now at the stage where scaling will happen, and we definitely hope so, and we will talk about it a bit later in this session. To conclude, what is your view of continuing the scaling after the external support is finished? The when can a technology fly on its own?
Thank you very much for that, that very interesting question. Most of our training exercises in terms of capacity building does not only lie within the farmer-based landscape. We are also training government officials that are actually anchoring this project, because we ensure that we bring the government of the different countries right at the beginning of the inception of this project, because we want them to claim ownership of the project. And we've seen government authorities in Kenya, Uganda, and even Rwanda actually taking this up into their existing framework, and this is really, really helping. And so we think this is going to heavily sustain this project. We also have the private sectors, all the small to medium scale enterprises we are developing, actually getting the personal support, and this is helping them to also get additional support from also donor platforms where we are helping to expose them. And we have seen a lot of them growing independently. And so with this approach of having a holistic system of people being able to sustain the technology once the project comes on end, we think we continue to scale this across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's a clear vision. Who has questions for our panel? I don't see very well here. Yes, at the front here. Please. Please stand up so that they know where you are. Yeah.
Thank you for those presentations. My questions are simple and addressed to Petronila. One is, at what level do you expect the donor to be engaged in talking about scaling? And then the second one, is scaling always a private sector business?
Go ahead. Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Helen. So based on the discussions that we had, we realized that the engagement of the donor in terms of talking about scaling actually starts at the beginning of the project conceptualization. So if the goal is we are doing this project for the purpose of achieving impact at scale, then that requires that we really start from the beginning. And I have to mention that I think, as Dr. Susan said earlier on, there are advances. There is a shift in terms of how the calls are formulated by the donors, the kinds of things that they are asking for, the emphasis on gender and inclusion, co-creation and co-ownership, because those are the essential ingredients for us to be able to even talk about scaling for impact. And then, okay, all right, so I think for me, the private sector is not the only way that we can scale, because if you're talking about the public good, the nature of public goods is such that you need a lot of government involvement for you to be able to deliver those goods. And this particular discussion that we focused on really, emphasizes more scaling for the public good, because I think that is an area where there's not been so much attention paid so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have other questions for our panel? Yes, there's one question there. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm Konkobo from Burkina Faso. Of course, I'm a business consultant in Africa here.
The microphone, sorry, the microphone doesn't work here, or not very well. Yeah. So our questioner is from Burkina Faso. I heard as much. Yes, very good.
So, as I was saying, I'm Suleiman Konkobo from Burkina Faso. I'm a business consultant in Burkina and in Africa. So it's a pleasure to listen to the achievement that the speakers have portrayed here. But still, of course, we see that a lot has been achieved, and it is even being achieved. But I was thinking about COVID,
And I'm thinking about the current Ukrainian war with its impact on our survival.
Yes.
So we know we have a lot of potential. We have many people researching. We've listened to the policies that have been done, but unfortunately we're still vulnerable. And we're obliged to, stretch out our hands to the other countries for our food. So what is the problem? I would like to know what is the single problem that makes us vulnerable, and if we have not access to food from these countries, we are going to die.
Can we ask Dr. Moses to comment on that in the context of the 5 elements of his scaling efficiency? I think that would be topical, if you don't mind.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I think COVID really has impacted negatively on the food supply systems. If you look at most African countries, they have been depending on fertilizer imports, and 40% of those fertilizer imports were actually coming from Russia and Belarus. So when the Ukraine war came, it significantly affected the imports of fertilizer in Africa. And that meant also it sort of disrupted the food production systems. And now we had to look for other ways of ensuring that our farmers are able to produce food. But at the same time also, I know that there's always a silver lining to every negative thing that happens. This COVID-19 pandemic also provides us with the opportunity to be able to develop our own capacities to be self-sufficient in our production systems. I can give you an example that recently in one of our member countries, Cameroon, the government actually decided to import wheat seed because they wanted to be self-sufficient in terms of wheat production, because originally they used to import wheat from Ukraine. And now we in Asoreka were privileged to support this process because we have a private sector network that includes seed companies and other actors. So these particular seed companies were able to support us in terms of providing this seed that was required by the government of Cameroon. So that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I noted that we were given a bit of a shorter time than expected, and I still have one small announcement to make, so I propose to finish the panel here. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much to the panelists, and I will now introduce myself, and I probably walk back there. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I am the only thing standing between you and your lunch. And however, the bad news is that there's no moderator there to say your time is up, and even the MC is slightly away. So I could drag on for a while, but I will try not to, because what I have to do now is first introduce our organization briefly, and present to you an announcement that relates to one thing we've heard today. So my name is Eric Huttner. I am a research program manager at the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. Our organization is designing and commissioning research projects which are delivered in a particular modality that is a collaboration between Australian researchers and the researchers in developing countries, mostly in the Asia-Pacific, but with a strong ongoing interest for the eastern side of Africa. We have 6 strategic goals, which are well aligned with most of our peers. We work towards food security and alleviating poverty, towards the better management of natural resources, preserving the natural resource base for the future, to address the impact of climate change, to promote human health through better agricultural practices and better nutrition, to promote women empowerment and gender equity, and to build capacity, those 6 goals. And in Africa, we've been very privileged to implement some of those activities we do in partnership with IDRC. And I salute here and thank very much the whole IDRC team for their involvement, their engagement, and their support in getting us to deliver together African activity. It's also a great pleasure to report that we're expanding the model of partnership with IDRC to Southeast Asia and the Pacific by working together on One Health, all the issues which affect agricultural species, animals, and humans in agricultural environments. Now, this is a perfect transition to talk about animal source food. We all know, and Dr. Tanga presented briefly the context, that particularly in developing countries and specifically in Africa, it would be good if people would eat a little bit more animal source food. There is a challenge of getting more affordable, available, and accessible animal source food into people. Now, there is, in order to achieve that, the challenge of providing farmers access to a balanced feed which has enough energy and protein to feed those animals is actually quite severe, as Dr. Tanga explained. Obviously, if the rich country consumers were exercising some restraint in their excessive consumption of animal source food, this would go a long way to solve some of the challenges we have. However, as the scaling discussion is relevant too, it is actually much harder to achieve the sort of behavior change that we need at planetary scale. And so we are back to finding technology solutions together with scaling, which could help at least part of the way to solve those massive issues. Now we need essentially to plug a gap, produce more protein-rich feed for the animals that we need to eat a bit more of. Now we had, together with IDRC, supported for many years under the Cultivate Africa's Future program, a project on developing insect-based feed components, and Dr. Tanga presented to you today very eloquently the success of this project that now is amenable for scaling, we think. And I'd like also to acknowledge the presence here of a representative of Makerere University who was involved in that work. I don't see her. Now, we are building on success, so it's time to move to the next stage. And for ACIAR, we are at the limit of our mandate that's strongly research and interest in scaling research, but we don't have the resources to go to the end of scaling. We are not a development agency, it has to be quite clear. And so today, I am announcing on behalf of the Research Program Manager for Livestock in ACR, Dr. Anna Okello, that we are commissioning a new project which will have some connection to Australian research activities on the production of insect-based feed, which is becoming an industry in my country as well as in Africa. This research activity will have a clear objective of scaling out what Dr. Tanga presented to you, and we are actually very excited at the idea that this scale out will represent 2 different scales of industry, one at the smallholder level and one at the commercial level, and the interaction between those 2 is going to be fascinating because the commercial providers will have the opportunity to acquire stock feed from the small producers. So there is here a diversity of approach which is likely to give us a lot of lessons about what can be done. So scale out is the first element of that research project. The second one will be on safety. We have a clear obligation of doing no harm. And if you think about it, there are many opportunities for harm to happen in that context. The feed could be unsafe for consumption. The humans handling the black soldier fly flour could suffer adverse effects. There's a lot of research needed to make sure that we have a safe and effective process to produce safe food. The corollary of this production of safe food is the regulatory aspect. We need the countries to review the evidence that we will provide and to implement regulatory schemes, because these are novel foods. People have not seen them before, really. And we know and understand that progressing this regulatory element or agenda will work at a different pace in different countries, and we will support that process. There will be a research aspect on public perception. It is really quite interesting to everyone to reflect on how much innovation scaling depends on the public being engaged. The participatory approach was mentioned by Petronella, I think, in a clear way. So exploring the dimension of public interest, public perception, the public belief that there are benefits for them, all these things is a matter of research. And the final point of research will be about the circular economy. Now, one more buzzword that we hear all the time. I think we have here an incredibly great opportunity to actually put in practice the idea that every waste of an industrial or agricultural process is probably the input for yet another process. And producing more goods and possibly more services out of this constant stream of waste is what circular economy is all about. And Dr. Tanga gave you specific examples which will require further research to be developed to scale. And so we are committing, the Australian government is committing $3 million Australian dollars over the next 5 years, with the Insect Research Center, ICP, being in charge of that project. And I am very privileged to have the opportunity to announce that to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eric. As he had mentioned, research is at the heart of transforming our food systems, but not only that. Partnerships are also crucial, and we have had that from the conversation since the beginning of today's session. I'd like us to now dive into the Partners Roundtable. I would like you to help me welcome our moderator who will be taking us through this session. Once again, I would like to invite Dr. Santiago to the stage. A round of applause as he makes his way.
Thank you. And I want to start actually from showing how partnership happens, that we can allow Eric to join us and share such a good news about the commitment that you continue on the projects. And actually, please join us back. You look like the star today. Join us in the panel to have a quick conversation about how we are working, because despite of the logos and the banners, this is the work of many institutions. And in particular, IDRC wants to recognize 4 of them that are critical in our work around food systems. One is ACIR, and Eric is with us. The other one is Rockefeller Foundation, and I think Roy Steiner is with us. Roy is the Senior Vice President for the Food Initiative at the Rockefeller Foundation, and you have here also the name and the logo of Rockefeller today during the presentations. And I also want to invite, please, to join Dr. Nalan Yüksel, which is the Special Advisor to the Director General Pan-Africa Affairs on Global Affairs Canada, and I cannot believe that it's 7 years since the last time they were in the same panel, so time flies. Unfortunately, we had today also with us Gates Foundation, but in the last minute we will not join us. But I also want to recognize that Gates Foundation is a critical partner of IDRC when we look at food systems, and a critical partner in our Livestock Vaccine Innovation Fund. And also want to recognize, not with us today because too many things happening at the same time, is FCDO, the government of the UK, because we have launched recently an over $100 million initiative working together with IDRC on climate adaptation and resilience that it was announced in Glasgow during the last COP, and is going to be a key pillar to something that we have here today about how resilience happens that goes beyond the food systems. So first of all, thank you for joining us, and thank you for being partners for many years in different ways. We want to use this opportunity to close the session on listening what can be done. And I think that was a request. I think we have here, even George was telling me we need more years. We cannot, that's only 3, give us 5. So we have a demand for the experts, for the farmers today, and for the researchers. And I want to hear a little bit from the different organizations, and you already, Eric, gave some vision of what ACIR is doing. But let's go to Roy. Rockefeller Foundation has not a new or semi-new vision and strategy on food security. But what are the must-have in order to have a strategy that really will support that transformation on food systems? And if that doesn't work, yes.
Okay. Great. It's a real pleasure to be here, Santiago. Well, I think it's interesting being around food systems for such a long time. I think all of us would like to see more progress. We're not seeing enough of it. And sometimes I think of, we're kind of like a plane and we're going down the runway, and if we don't get enough resources and don't get enough collaboration, we'll never take off. We'll still be keeping going forward, but it's not going to be enough. And I think the elephant in the room is always, we need more collaboration, and we need more resources, and we need governments to come in. It's still only 2 to 4% of budgets are going to agriculture. So that's just one fundamental. I don't think food systems is the most important sector, in my opinion, for governments to be investing in. I do think that I'm quite excited by some of the innovations that are coming down the line, especially around ag energy and the ability for solar energy to energize and decarbonize rural areas. I mean, the lack of energy is really keeping, I think, African agriculture back. And so the ability of solar energy to deliver really cheap, effective, reliable electricity is encouraging. The other is this whole regenerative circular approach. I mean, I think there's so much there, not just the insect-based feed. I was visiting a women's cooperative yesterday, and we're discussing soybeans, and they were going to put urea on soybeans. You don't need urea for soybeans. If you had your inoculum, there are biological ways to improve your system, and I think we need a lot more knowledge and the ability to use these new approaches that are being labeled regenerative or circular to really come in full speed. And then the third thing is to really look at some behaviors that we've had and be willing to question assumptions. For example, right now a lot of flour, maize flour or wheat flour is consumed in a refined form. And the reason why is that whole grain used to be have very small, short shelf life, about 4 weeks. Now you have milling technology that can do whole grain of 6 months or plus. Well, by just shifting from refined grain to whole grain, you increase the amount of food by 20 to 30% overnight. Like, there's no other intervention that can do that. You increase the nutrition by 5 times, and you do it at no extra cost. We need things like that to not just follow patterns of behavior we've had in the past, but to really re-examine some of the approaches we've had. And just moving to fortified whole grain, for example, in all schools in Africa would literally overnight improve nutrition and increase the amount of food availability. And we need to take advantage of these opportunities. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Roy. Eric, I went to you now. ACIR was embarked some years ago on a 10 years vision, a strategic plan that was very ambitious. You are halfway. There have been some evaluations. What are you learning as a donor in this process that will support this transformation?
Yeah, thank you. I think the first thing is to try. I am not a development person. I am a crop geneticist. And every time I hear the word donor, I think we are missing the fact that the money spent is actually an investment. And I guess that frames, I come from the private sector before working for government. When you make an investment, you want a return. And you scope and you frame your investment for a return. And that could be a return in public goods. That's absolutely fine. But that gives a little bit of a different sense to what it's about. The review of our strategy did not change the 6 strategic goals, but identified that we could be more effective if we had larger projects with a broader scope. And I think we're going to respond to that. At the same time, and I express here my personal views now, I think there is a scope for a balanced portfolio because as many of the speakers and even the audience have said, we do have specific problems to solve as well as components of the system. And I think Roy just gave a few very excellent examples of where some technological development, including some pretty mundane ones, could make a very big difference to the status quo. The last thing I want to say about strategy, in my view, is that the food security, if not the food system, definitely requires intensification. There's a big debate about that. My view is quite formed that we simply need more food for the same or less input, whether the input is land, whether it's labor, or whether it's inputs as farm inputs. I think the path forward is to intensify.
Thank you, Eric. Nalan, what needs to change at both? I think it's not only in the donor side, also in the recipient of the money, but what needs to change to be able to enable the transformation on the food systems, and in particular in Africa, now that that is your priority? I don't know.
Mine would.
Thanks, Santiago, for leaving me with the easy question. You know, it's an interesting one because in your first question, when you said what can be done, it kind of struck me that we've been talking about this for a very, very long time. In the early 2000s, when the MDGs were there and we had the Hunger Task Force and we were writing this big report of the Hunger Task Force of what can be done, we actually said it can be done was the title of that report, of our report. And now, 20 years later, we're asking the question, what can be done? When we already know that we do already have a lot of the solutions. It's just putting them in place. And I think it was mentioned in terms of, most of the speakers today have mentioned some of the key ingredients. I think from Canada's perspective, and thank you so much to IDRC for inviting us to be here. As I'm a policymaker, so I'm not on the science side, but we've been looking at the issue of food security and food insecurity. And what we're really seeing is this food systems approach to agricultural development. We know this, it needs to go beyond production and consumption. It needs to encompass crop quality, diversification, storage, transportation, marketing, advanced rural development, and increased employment. And of course, from Canada's perspective, and I think from many others in the room, it must adopt a gender transformative approach to advance women's empowerment. And I know historically we have focused on improving agriculture and food systems, especially in Canada as well, and focusing predominantly on increasing production and the supply of food. However, I think when we're looking at the global attention has shifted to addressing the root causes of insecurities and malnutrition. And I really do like the fact that we're using a food systems approach now in our language that we hadn't used before. And this is really about looking at nutrition, nutritional safe. We're looking at affordability. We're looking at inclusive and sustainable diets. And this really became apparent, and someone mentioned, thank you for mentioning the COVID-19. I think it's actually shown us some of the weak spots in our supply system. And so for Canada, we really underscore the importance for donors and grantees to establish projects with a multi-dimensional perspective to enable this transformation of food systems in Africa. And we have a lot of experience working with IDRC on the CIFSURF as well. And some of the CIFSURF, the Canadian International Food Security Research Fund, and some of the lessons learned coming out of CIFSURF, I think, can be translated into other areas that we know. And this is about consolidating gender and nutrition-sensitive data into a resilient food systems, and this being key to the future. Better land use and water resource management as critical. And obviously looking at local priorities. And as I'm saying this, these are not anything new that we haven't done in the past. And I recognize that, but someone mentioned the political will. And I think this is what we need to do, is taking the research that we're doing, the great research and the innovation, and putting it into policy and action, and putting it into a format that can be easily digestible by the policymakers across the continent. Someone mentioned AFCFTA, which trade I think is critical, but I know there's sessions that we're talking about that. There's one thing I'm going to just highlight is the humanitarian assistance. When we're talking about the food crises in Africa, I don't think anyone would say that a humanitarian crisis isn't needed. But what we really do need to have is just a bit of a balance in terms of how we're looking at addressing the food crisis, and looking at strengthening livelihoods, food fortification, and agri-food systems resilience. And I know, and just in closing off in terms of, we haven't talked about COP, but leading up to COP, I think this is an opportunity that we have to change the dialogue on how we're looking at climate change, and where the food systems approach, the language on nutrition and nutrition-sensitive, gender-sensitive food systems can feed into the dialogue on climate change. So in closing, I would say that Canada, we call on the international community to continue to mobilize the investments. We talked about the underinvestments needed, the political will needed to collectively address the causes and consequences of this rising food and nutrition crises. So I'll leave it at that for now.
These ones. And actually, I want to use one of your last comments to drop a question to the rest of the panel, and then we can close on time and go for lunch, and unless we have some urgent questions. What can we do as development actors to really move the agenda of food systems into the COP and the climate discussions? And we have here from yours today, from the ACMES, from the group of negotiators, but and we started this morning talking about an African COP, what can we do, or how can we do it in order to really bring the solutions, the discussions into the climate discussions? I want to start with you, looking at you, Roy, so you have to jump on this one. Since the last meeting, last time that we were together was in COP.
Well, I would say a practical responses find all the key government people from Egypt and make sure whoever is designing the agenda gets agriculture at the center. Because this is one of the big issues that anybody who went to COP26 is, you know, food systems. It's 1/3 of global climate change, and no one was really talking about it. It's incredibly frustrating and nearsighted, and we need to change, as you mentioned, need to change that narrative. I think also showing up there and collaborating and cooperating with all the groups. You know, the reality of the world is you can't do anything alone. You have to work with others, even if it's painful, even if it's stressful. It's the only way forward in a world that is so interconnected.
Anything more? Eric, you want to add something?
Just bring that one level lower, which is easier for my own way of, my own vision of the world. I think that's exactly right. That's the way forward, but we then need to provide some pointers as to what you could do. And so I will mention two. There are hundreds, obviously. One of them is around food waste, and that's, again, an area where ACR and IDRC are actually investing together, trying to find solutions around food waste. The other one that's very dear to my heart and could be the topic of further work is to deal with nitrogen. Nitrogen is a key input for crop production. The Ukraine war and the tension on fertilizer supply is showing as such. It's a major contributor of greenhouse gas emission. It may be the largest thing that agriculture does for the planet. It is an area where we definitely need to innovate more, and I believe that there are multidimensional innovation which could be brought to bear, but will require investment, research, ingenuity, some clever people, a few geniuses, and policies, and a price on carbon, and all those things. But, and of course, there are many other opportunities, but these are the ones which exercise my mind, definitely.
Thank you. Any other thing?
No, just to agree that we do have an opportunity at this COP. I think Ukraine was mentioned, COVID was mentioned, and the rising food issue and rising food prices. But I think it's also understanding where we diverge and whether there's this dichotomy sometimes that happens between the environment and agriculture. But there are, within that dichotomy, I think that there are so many interesting intersections that we have in common. And I think that's the key thing I think that we're going to need to raise at COP27 as well, is where we can look forward to the future and have a greener future. And I think, and I know most of our negotiators right now, we're trying to look at that, but not look at it as so confrontational, but look at it as a partnership for the future.
Thank you. So with this, this makes a lot of noise. We are concluding today's discussions, and I think we take, I hope that all of you take notes and lessons, and hopefully you take also business cards from other people that you can continue the conversations, because the main idea of having all of us together is that we can put faces to the work that we do, and we can have names of people that we can continue collaborating, and we for sure will continue collaborating as partners and with many of you. I went to actually, as we were speaking and talking, we have in the back the Senior Program Officer from IDRC in Eastern Southern Africa, Mercy Rory, that was taking notes and trying to make a little bit sense of every single thing and all the complexity of food systems. So, Mercy, can you tell us what is the taking home message? I don't know if it's singular, and then with that we can close the day.
Let's go back to
Deputy Director General, Rwanda Agricultural Board, Dr. Buchagu Charles, and the Director Policy and Planning from Zambia, Peggy Mlewa, distinguished panel up here, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Santiago, my director, has mentioned, my name is Mercy Rorie, and I'm a program officer in the Nairobi office for the International Development Research Center of Canada. And my task is to give to distill some of the information we've got here today into very simple key takeaway messages. So as a young girl growing up in rural Kenya, the message I kept hearing is that agriculture is the engine of growth for Africa. The paradox I see is that the producers, who are our smallholder farmers, and particularly women, are actually the poorest, most marginalized, and hungriest component of this population. So how is this possible, that agriculture is the engine of growth, but our smallholder farmers are the poorest, most marginalized, and hungriest of people? Couple that with pandemics, climate change, political instability and wars. We've heard today about the Ukraine war. And we have a recipe that makes the food system even more challenging and more complex, as Santiago mentioned this morning. So we must ask whether Africa is able to offer a decent livelihood for its farmers and whether Africa can feed itself. And the innovations today point us to the possibilities that we have and the potential that sits in this continent for the capacity to feed its people and use technologies to do so. So I want to do 3 key takeaways this afternoon. Number 1, what we have heard today is that innovations are great. We cannot do without them, and whether we are talking about technologies, methodologies, processes, innovations are great. But we must move those innovations beyond pilots and proof of concept. There must be, at some point, an aggregation point of this knowledge that comes from all these pilots and proof of concept projects to make a greater and positive impact in this continent. We must go further than proving the utility of those innovations to greater adoption and use of them by those actors along the food system who need them most. And they need not be rocket science, out of this world innovations. They can be simple innovations. We heard about the chameleon sensors. They can be simple innovations that can make a great impact. And that has been demonstrated effectively this morning by some of these projects that we have heard about. Science. There is no shortcut to great science that gives us the evidence and the data that we need to move policy in the right direction. There is no shortcut, and that must be done. George Wamukoya this morning told us it was guesswork. 100 billion was a guessing game because we did not have the data that we needed to say this is what we need for climate adaptation in Africa. And so great science is important. But more than great science, you need a few more ingredients to bring all this knowledge together to make an impact. And so you need different actors. You need to bring science to the policymakers in a way that they can understand it. You need to engage the private sector because some of these innovations, there is no scale without the private sector. And so sometimes we need to think about which private sector actors would be most beneficial in these innovations. We need to understand the role that men and women play along the food system so that we can have appropriately targeted interventions that address the barriers that each of these groups face. And therefore, we would be targeting even the most excluded of populations from the food system. Number 3, we need a paradigm shift in the way we manage or fund projects or innovations. We need to be consistent. We need to be intentional. We need to be deliberate. And we need to find an approach to funding that has a longevity to it, because at the end of the day, science takes a lot of time to do. Policy takes a lot of time to do. And so we have to find a way that gives us the time to develop the science, to back up the policy that we need to move these innovations and their impact to greater scale and make the change that we want to see. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mercy. And thank you to all the panel. Thank you, all of you. Final words to our excellent Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you so much, Mr. Santiago, as well as our partners. We appreciate everything that is being done and all the presenters, everything that has been shared. We have come to the end of today's session. I have a few announcements. Right at the back, we have exhibitions of some of the projects that have been mentioned here. So do spare a few minutes before walking out, just go read through and see what is being done and to the extent in which impact is being felt within different countries here on the continent. Also, we have members of the protocol team. They have lunch coupons. So do make sure to get to one of the protocol ladies and get yourself a lunch coupon. And they will also direct you to where lunch is being served. And finally, we started on a vibrant note. We'll end on the same note. I would like you to help me welcome Inganzongari, who are going to once again showcase and give us a warm send-off from this particular session. So Inganzongari, if you could guys kindly come in and get us all grooving and moving. I would like all of you to join in. Feel free. Show us your moves. It's okay. Yeah. And thank you all for today.
Kumba mama wenye yeheza chibikumba weye mjengwe ni chani wajazo nyabusa wenye yengi watu kumuyanje mjengwe ngumeli visawo mama wenye Jamanga Rajenga Usasure Yengero Yemurare Yegomeza Yemukabuze dutahe Yemure Yegomeza Nemukumunda